Hello, hi, and a very, very good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on which part of the world you're checking in from. I hope you're all having a fantastic day so far. Thank you so much for taking time to be part of today's AD Self-Service Plus webinar. I am Sharada Murthy. I'm a technical expert in Managing AD Self-Service Plus, and I work with the marketing team of Managing Engineering. I will be your presenter for the day. Before I jump into today's session, I would like to do a very quick audio and video check. So if you can hear me loud and clear, and if you have no issues in viewing the screen, please drop in a yes message in the chat box provided. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right. A very quick disclaimer first. I'm working remotely. I'm working from the comfort of my home, but I'm also connected to my home network. So in case of a power outage, in case there are discrepancies with the video or audio at any point of time, please keep me notified by dropping a message in the chat box. With Zoom, I unfortunately do not have an audience view as a presenter, so I wouldn't know if the broadcast is seamless unless you notify me. So please keep me informed by dropping a message. And yes, if you do have any questions, please make use of the Q&A tab to drop in your questions. I will be able to answer your questions live. The more the better, so thank you so much. And yes, today we will be talking about securing user identities to establish zero trust. Before I jump into today's session, I would like to also quickly understand my audience better. Since this is a product session, I want to know what part of today's audience are existing customers of AD Self-Service Plus and what part of today's audience are either evaluating the solution. If it's neither, I would request you to completely skip the poll. All right, thank you. Please take a couple of seconds to answer the poll that you see on the screen. All right. I'm going to very quickly jump to talk about today's agenda. So I am someone who truly believes that zero trust definitely begins with password security. More importantly, password security with your intentions to protect user identities is definitely a great start for zero trust, because once you secure your user accounts, you can work towards securing your organization better, because the trouble that you have to deal with is much lesser. So when I speak about zero trust, or when I speak about zero trust for password security, I definitely want to talk about password guidelines, especially when we are somebody on an organizational level or on a global level, still working with Active Directory. Nearly 90% of the world still makes use of Active Directory. They are very much reliant on an on-premises infrastructure. But that said, a lot of us are also in a hybrid infrastructure where we where we work with Office 365 and multiple other such applications. So it's important for us to not only pay attention to our on-premises Microsoft infrastructure, revisit our password practices, but also collectively have a better environment that we can work with. So today I will be discussing password guidelines and best practices, more specifically the NIST password guidelines. I am also going to talk about multi-factor authentication to improve your organization's user identity security, work with multi-factor authentication across different checkpoints. I will be walking you through enabling conditional access based on risk factors, and also talk about single sign-on, simplified single sign-on, and how this is in context to zero trust. So this is the agenda put forth in front of me today. Once again, if you have any questions, please let me know. After seeing your poll, I do realize that most of you are not familiar with AD Self-Service Plus. So just to make it easy, I am going to pass on the AD Self-Service Plus demo link for you in the chat console. It's a live actionable demo. You will be able to log in as an administrator, explore the application. It's available 24/7, and get a hands-on of working with AD Self-Service Plus. But That said, I do have my setup pre-configured. Since this is an end user application, we will be working with how things look from an end user's perspective. I've pre-configured the application, but at any point of time, if you have any questions, please let me know. And starting with the password guidelines, right? What happens when a user traditionally goes through a password reset? So password reset or change password. The user simply has to type in the old password, key in the new password, confirm the password, and many a times the password goes through, provided you have not enabled the password history rule, which you can do with the native password policy, provided you have not enabled an advanced password policy. All right. But if you do notice, many a times users will also be able to set weak predictable patterns and passwords like this. Parts of the username patterns like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is something that we definitely have to tackle, because brute force attack across the globe, no matter which part of the world you're checking in from, definitely targets weak passwords, stolen credentials, makes use of a big directory of predictable patterns and passwords while attacking or while performing the brute force, right? So it's easy for users to lose their identity, to be susceptible to cybersecurity attacks. And a good reality check is nearly 4 out of 5 Microsoft accounts, user accounts, are susceptible to cyber attacks. So we definitely need to work on improving the password scenario when it comes to password policy. So what can we do instead? Pay attention to password guidelines or regulations. More importantly, something that you have to comply to in your region, which is mandated across organizations or domains. Pay attention to guidelines that are universally followed across the globe. A great example is NIST. We also have password-based guidelines that are specific to certain countries. There is also NSE, which is more specific to the European and United Kingdom part of the world. NIST is for federal organizations across the globe. So make sure that you comply to password regulations, or you take a look at password best practices and customize a granular password policy that definitely disallows predictable patterns like QRT, ASDF, patterns and passwords that are susceptible to cybersecurity attacks. You can also work with passphrases. Talking specifically about the NIST regulations, it does stress upon the fact that passphrases or longer passwords are definitely much more secure when compared to introducing more complexity to passwords. I'm going to give you a live example as well in just a couple of seconds. But that said, work with disallowing characters from the username, disallowing the old passwords, characters from the old password, prevent incremental password-based attack, pattern-based attack, password history-based attack, prevent brute force, a huge chunk of brute force attack, prevent, multiple other predictable patterns and password-based attacks that we are aware of, that we have taken time to decipher by simply introducing these advanced complexity rules. It does not have to simply mean adding special characters or numeral or Unicode characters and things like that, right? I am going to show you an example. I have deliberately configured this. As you see on the screen, I have not enabled passphrases. I also have some advanced password complexities enabled. So let's look at a live example. But before we do that, I also want to very quickly talk about enabling your integration with Have I Been Pawned. If you are familiar with AD Self-Service Plus, if not, you can also work with integrating Have I Been Pawned on an organization level with other third-party applications that you probably make use of, or try to, import a list of weak predictable patterns and passwords and manually set up a system where users do not have this as their password. So Have I Been Pawned integration is a simple, straightforward click. It will ensure that users who type in passwords match with weak databases, predictable patterns, and leaked or stolen passwords and credentials. It's not a match, and it will make sure that users in your organization have better passwords. But that's it. Let's look at all this in action. I'm going to very quickly change a password page, enter my username, key in my old password, and as you can see, the password complexity is already listed. But when I try to reset my password, I'm also going to show you what this password is, though it seems like it's a strong password because it checks multiple boxes. It is not. It is password at 123. It might have an uppercase, include numerals, it might have characters that it might meet some or most of the requirements. And these are the kind of passwords we are definitely trying to avoid because it has predictable patterns, it has a dictionary word, it is definitely not a safe password. And on integration with Have I Been On, it will also notify that it belongs to leaked databases and it's a password that is unsafe. This is exactly the situation that we need to arrive to on an organization level, educate users about the password complexity rules that they need to meet, but more importantly, also display the password that they type in and let them know why their password is being rejected. Once again, talking about length over complexity, I'm going to talk about one of my favorite tools that I like to use when I'm in a demonstration. So this is the Kaspersky password check. I am going to display this. It's a very small example that I'd like to share with all of you. So when I give in password at 123, for instance, okay, it clearly says it takes about 3 hours to break in, but I'm sure it's much lesser. Let me introduce more complexity, right? This does not cut the job. It still can be cracked in a short period of time. It can cause user identity compromise. But what about something that is easy to remember? And yet strong enough. And this is what we call as a passphrase. It does not have complexities and yet is a password that is easy to remember and not easy to crack. It takes a lot of time to break into really long passwords. So with a granular password policy, you also have an option to introduce or enforce a minimum password length of, let's say, 8, 10, 13, and also allow users to set really long passwords, which we call as passphrases, that allows them to not be prey to easy, predictable brute force attacks, right? That said, with this custom granular password policy that I've enforced for a specific user group, I also can enforce it across my Gina CP screen. Let me once again show you this in action. I'm trying to reset my password. I click on OK. I'm doing this from the ADUC console with administrative privileges. I literally have the utmost privileges in this domain that I'm working with, and yet I need to comply to a custom granular password policy that has been enforced, and that is the importance of having a better password policy and ensuring that at no point of time do users in your organization have a password that is easily susceptible to cybersecurity attacks. Once again, very quickly walking you through the different password guidelines: prioritize length over complexity, display the password for users to improve usability, but more importantly, to allow users to have a visual example of what their password is, and remove hints. We do not require hints. It's not a recommended practice because many a times users input their password has hints, which makes it easy for a user identity compromise. Definitely work with more advanced complexity rules like the dictionary rule, the passphrase rule, work with history, password history-based rule, incremental password-based rule, pattern, restrict based on patterns as well. Work with passphrases. And that's a great best practice that you can follow or enable or enforce on an organizational level. And also not relying just on passwords is also a great password best practice, all right? 2 factors of authentication is always better than 1, and multiple factors of authentication pretty much makes a particular user identity hack resistant, all right? It buys you enough time to break into, to understand or decipher a particular cybersecurity attack or pattern even before it is incident, even before it happens in your organization. And that is what MFA is all about. So with AD Self-Service Plus, you definitely can enable users to take care of their own password management chores, but more importantly, enable multi-factor authentication for across self-service logons, across your endpoints, across different portals that they log in and access to, different applications that they log in and access to. Make sure that they work with different levels of authentication and mandate it, especially for your remote users, especially for users checking in from different parts of the world, different parts of the country via private networks. And it's important to ensure that Not a single user's identity is compromised. And when I say users, I'm definitely addressing end users more specifically, because nearly 80% of cyber attacks that have happened across the globe definitely target end users, and the 20% targets administrative accounts, privileged accounts, or temporary contract accounts. All right, so it's important for you to be able to safeguard your end user accounts first, and the best way to do it is to introduce multi-factor authentication. I'm going to walk you through a live example as well today, but before I do that, I have a question for all of you. Do let me know if you have enabled MFA in your organization. What level of MFA have you enabled? Is it for all the users across all endpoints, applications, and devices? Have you specifically enabled MFA for administrative users and privileged accounts? Or is it for specific applications like Office 365 or more critical applications? I am looking forward to reading your answers, but in the meantime, I'm going to very quickly go through, jump to my page right here. Let us look at a live password reset. So I am clicking on the password reset or account unlock option available right here. As an end user, I will be able to self-service my own passwords, but in order to do that efficiently, I need to verify my identity. So let's get started. I click on reset password. I'm entering my username. I'm working with the domain SSP workshop. I've entered the CAPTCHA. Very quickly grabbing my phone because I need to verify my identity with the Microsoft Authenticator. And this is my workflow. You can work with any authenticator that users prefer in your organization. Users are comfortable in in your organization. So I have two factors of authentication enabled for password reset for this particular user. So let me go ahead with security question answer. I'm keying in my favorite color, entering the country that I dream of vacationing in. I click on continue, and then I am redirected to the reset password console. What's going to happen here is when I key in a password that complies with our advanced complexity rules, that does not have predictable patterns and passwords, I see a check against all the complexity rules. When I hit reset password, I will be able to successfully reset password not only for my AD account, but also synchronize it with my hybrid account, my Office 365 business account as well. And that is because of the advantage of password synchronization. I'm going to wait for this to go through. It's taking a bit of a time. In the meantime, if you do have questions, let me know. I'm going to wait for this to go through. I'm not sure if it is an internet connection or if it's because it's taking time to reflect on the server. But I'm going to wait for that to go through. I know it will. All right, so we have Saladin. Sorry if I'm pronouncing any wrong. We have Saladin, and Saladin has enforced multi-factor authentication for some executives, some users, and some applications. That's great. Thank you. Thank you for taking time to answer. Yes, it has been successful. And this is for both Office 365 and my native AD. So it's easy for you to actually delegate self-service to users in your organization and allow them to take care of their own password management chores. But more importantly, you can be rest assured that the security is not compromised, because not only do you have advanced password policy to enable users to have better passwords, to strengthen the first layer of defense, which is passwords in itself, but also introduce MFA across different checkpoints. Let's look at another example as well. I am going to establish a VPN connection. Right now I'm checking in from India, and almost 100% of my workforce is working remotely. This is because of the pandemic situation we're in, but when we do speak about remote work on an organizational level, it is critical to safeguard user identities, especially when they connect and have access to the organization's network, or when they have access to remote desktops as well. So ensure that you revisit your VPN vulnerabilities, make sure that you have your patching on schedule. You can also keep a tab or set a reminder to ensure that all the latest updates are reflected, because VPN vulnerabilities have been exploited the most in the last 1 year. Nearly, if I remember this number right, nearly 35%. I'm not sure if I'm saying this right, but I love numbers. I love reading about reports. Nearly 35% of cybersecurity attacks have targeted VPN vulnerabilities. And that might not seem like a large number, but just between February to May, there has been a 400% increase in VPN-based attacks. So yes, you need to safeguard your VPN as well with multi-factor authentication. But when we speak about RDPs, make sure you have or work with the principle of least privilege. Make sure that only the right people, the people who actually need access to RDPs have access to RDPs. But more importantly, you can also introduce an administrative authentication for remote desktop connections. It's also a feature that's available with the native tool. Let me verify my identity with Google Authenticator. As you can see, I'm working with a combination of authenticators. These are not recommended authenticators. I just wanted you to have a couple of options. But if you would ask me, I would definitely recommend 3 levels of authentication, no matter what the authenticator is. The first is, in most cases, passwords. The second has to be something that the user has or the user owns. It could be a mail account, it could be a mobile device, it could be something that belongs to the user, which will help verify user identity, like an app-based authentication. And third but final would definitely be what the user is, which is biometrics. Fingerprint authentication or Face ID is great. And you can achieve all 3 levels of authentication with ED Self-Service Plus. All right, a successful VPN connection has been established with for Adam by verifying user identity twice, once with password and the other with Google Authenticator. So very quickly moving on to talk about conditional access. If you do have any questions, please keep them coming. I would love to take time to answer them. And yes, talking about conditional access, or talking in general about how access works, especially with an application like AD Self-Service Plus, is that you will be able to define what level of self-service action or access you would like to delegate to users in your organization. Would you like users to have enjoy the benefits of password self-service? I'm really sorry for the slow connection. I will get this checked as soon as I wrap up. This was not anticipated, but yes, as long as it keeps me going. Sorry about that. So yes, talking about access with respect to AD Self-Service Plus, what happens is we can manually define users into groups. These groups can basically be anything from user roles, user privileges, users, departments. It could be based on the geographical location that they check in from. It could be based on compliance mandates as well. But importantly, you can also decide manually the level of permission that you'd like to delegate. So we have Adam from marketing. I'm going to log in into Adam's portal as well real soon, but you see he does not have an option to self-update personal information. And we have two other user groups that have different set of permissions. So this is manual permission, where you can define what user groups have what level of access and how you'd like to delegate these access. What conditional access is all about is it allows the application to decide whether this particular user checking in from a particular machine at a particular time from a particular location through a particular device needs full access to these features. All right, this comes in handy once again, especially for remote users, simply because if a user's logon conditions are a red flag, you can block access and deny user permission to access these features. If not, you can also choose to increase access with ensured MFA. You can also choose to allow limited access or allow full access, and this is decided by the application, but you define the risk factors or conditions right here. So I'm going to very quickly walk you through a small example of what I've pre-configured. This is a test setup. I can choose to set it based on IP addresses and ranges, but what I have chosen to do is set restrictions based on platform. So I only have Windows users logging in. I only have Windows users logging in from one particular computer that I'm working with today. And I've also set restrictions based on business hours. So any activity from Monday to Friday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. is allowed, and also set a geolocation map to the country that I'm checking in from, India. So the criteria here is 3 and 4 and 2. All right. You can work with different criteria. It could also be not 2 if you do not want people to check in. I'm sorry, not 4 if you do not want people checking in from India, or things like that. You get the drill. It's simple, straightforward, and you can also map it to the policies that you've built. Pretty much everything in AD Self-Service Plus works based on self-service policies that you've built. So map it to the policy and ensure that anybody logging in at non-business hours or through devices that have not been verified will not have access, or will be allowed only limited access to certain self-service actions and permissions. And these red flags are decided by the application. So definitely recommend conditional access, especially if you're working towards establishing zero trust on an organization level. It's important to enable conditional access to ensure that users at any point of time do not have their accounts compromised, do not have their data and access compromised. All right. Very quickly, moving on to talk about single sign-on as well. You can enable single sign-on for applications that you see on the screen right here. We have single sign-on available for more than 100 pre-configured applications. But interestingly, you can also enable it for any custom SAML application, both on-premises and cloud-based application as well. Why this is recommended, why this makes things easy or simple for end users, is they will have a one-click access to multiple business applications that you have selectively provided access to. Let me get to that right now. So I have pre-configured single sign-on for Zendesk and Zendesk and G Suite right here, but the policies that I've associated it with is restricted, which means when users who are not part of this particular policy try to access G Suite, they will be denied access. They will not have a one-click seamless access to these applications. So you can also work with access control for applications right here. Let me quickly log into one of these user accounts to show you this in action. I'm going to log in as Adam. Where I click login, and I will have to verify my identity. I have enabled two-factor authentication for my self-service portal as well. Verify my CAPTCHA. Click on continue. And then redirected to the applications tab right here, where I can click and log into Adam's account without having to try and log in every single time. The account is also automatically mapped, and you can choose to map it as well. Sorry about that. You can also choose to map it as well. I'll talk about that in a few seconds. But as you can see, this particular user does not have permission to reset password, change password, and only can enroll with authenticators or can log in and access single sign-on applications that have been assigned to this particular user. But interestingly, I'm also going to log into Sharda's account right now with the password that I just reset. I need to verify my identity. If you did notice, I had an option with 2 authenticators for the previous user, whereas for this particular user, I have to go through security questions that can also be customized based on user groups. But the advantage of delegating self-service permissions to users, especially for privileged or critical users or administrative users, is you can also allow them to self-update personal information real time. So let me think. So let's say my office is in Turkey. I click on update. It was previously Australia. These changes are reflected real time. Let me quickly show you that when an end user tries to update information or performs a change password or reset password at any point of time, enrolls with authenticators, their information is updated real time. Properties have been updated successfully. I'm waiting for this to open. I click on Sharada. There we go. The office location has been updated. All right, so it is up to you to decide what level of self-service access you would like to delegate to users in your organization. You can also decide how you would like users to have access to applications and authenticators, but you can also choose to introduce conditional access to take into account red flags that you do not have manually control of. So let's say if somebody is checking in from India, foreign office that is probably in Japan and need not have access, that particular red flag is automatically, that particular risk factor is automatically taken into account. It is a red flag, and this particular user will be denied access. You can always, inquire the situation before providing selective access. And this is what Zero Trust is all about. It's all about establishing what level of access users have on an organization level and working with the principle of least privilege and just-in-time access. Also, a couple of tips that I do want to pass on to you, especially if you do have a huge chunk of remote employees or users in your organization, is to definitely revisit your security policies. Ensure that they do not have, the access or privilege that they do not require. Work with the principle of least privilege, but more importantly, provide access only when called for, provide access only during that period of time, and revoke access or revoke permissions. Like I said, for remote desktop users, you can always enable administrative verification as well, introduce multi-factor authentication on an organizational level. You can also keep a tab on all that's happening in your end users infrastructure right here under the user attempt audit report. Everything that's happened today, right from logons, security question verification, also failed logons. I have one right here, user account has been locked out, can be monitored right here under the audit reports. The same holds good for multiple password or other self-service audits that you see on the screen. And I also want to let you know that you can keep a tab on passwords that are soon to expire, passwords that have already expired, and have a better control on the password management situation in your organization, especially if you work with a hybrid infrastructure. You can definitely selectively filter out information based on SAML access, based on, let me work with this. This is type. All right, selectively work with SAML access, selectively work with different authentication that you've enabled, and keep a tab on what's happening in your end user's environment, keep a tab on what's happening in your organization, and collectively, let's work towards establishing zero trust by revisiting our password policies, by enforcing better password practices, and also securing user identities. With that said, I am done with today's session. I've covered all the exercises in today's agenda, but I'm going to take time to answer questions. So if you do have any, please drop in your questions in the Q&A tab. I'm going to take the next 10 minutes to answer all your questions. And in the meantime, I'm also going to launch the feedback form for you to Let me know if you enjoyed today's session, if all your questions were answered, if your expectations were met. You can also choose to rate me as a presenter on a scale of 1 to 5. If you do have any particular topic that you want me to discuss in the near future, any questions, ideas, suggestions, comments, please feel free to drop in your messages in the chat box. I would love to take in your feedback. I would love to rework and improve this experience for the upcoming audience, but more importantly, better myself for the upcoming audience as well. And I also want to very quickly pass on my email address for all of you to be in touch. I am available at sharad@managedengine.com. You can reach out to me at any point of time for any questions that you have on ED Self-Service Plus, on identity, user identity management, user identity protection. You can reach out to me at any point of time for questions that you have on hybrid identity and access management. I would be more than happy to help you with all the resources that I have. And if it's beyond my scope, I promise to redirect you to the right resources. So yes, do write to me, do shoot your questions, your requests to me, and I will be happy to help. On that note, before I check out of today's session, I want to quickly put this across. I wish, hope, and pray you, your friends, your family, your near and dear are blessed with great health and happiness. Please take great care of yourself, and let's come out of this pandemic as better, happier, healthier individuals. And that is my wish for all of you. I hope you enjoyed today's session. Thank you so much for taking time to be part of today's session. This session has been recorded and has been recorded live. So give us a day or two to process the raw edits before it reaches your inbox, and take great care of yourself. Good day. Thank you. Namaste.